Hair is one of those things we hardly notice until it begins to disappear. We brush it, cut it, dye it, tear at it in frustration, yet rarely stop to ask, what is it really for? Look closely, literally under a microscope, and each strand appears as a marvel of biological engineering. Spiral layers of keratin, both elastic and resilient, capable of surviving for decades, even long after the rest of the body has decayed. Hair is dead tissue, yet it grows from a living source, the hair follicles hidden in the skin. These are the laboratories of growth, the factories of keratin, where cells are born, harden, and die in perfect sequence, forming what we see on the outside. Each of us is born with a fixed number of follicles, about 5 million. No new ones appear, they can't be reproduced. Only a fraction, those on the scalp, work continuously for years, while others, like eyelashes or arm hair, lead short, modest lives. But the true story of hair begins much earlier, long before humans appeared. Hair is an evolutionary invention of mammals, a tool for survival in a world of heat and cold. The fur we evolved from was its original form, a protein armor that protected against heat loss, rain, radiation, and predators. That we now have only a remnant of it is one of evolution's most extraordinary experiments. Humans, the only naked apes, gave up fur in exchange for something far more valuable: the ability to cool the body through sweat. In the scorching savannas where our ancestors hunted and fled under a relentless sun, fur became a burden. Bare skin allowed water to evaporate and sweat to lower body temperature. Hair began to vanish, but not completely. It remained where it was still needed. On the head, to protect the brain from radiation and overheating. On the brows and lashes, to shield the eyes from sweat and dust. In the nose, under the arms, and around the genitals, where it served protective and communicative roles. Because hair doesn't only protect, it speaks. Among animals, fur is a message. It tells of age, health, strength, readiness to fight or to reproduce. In humans, the remnants of that communication have survived in another form. Hair became a tool of expression, a cultural language. Its color, length, and arrangement have for thousands of years served the same purpose manes, feathers, or skin markings once did. Hair began to tell stories of identity, and yet its biological purpose remains. Because even now, it's more than decoration. Hair is a protective, sensory, and historical system all at once. Each individual hair is a microarchive of life. Within its structure, one can read what substances circulated through the body months ago. Heavy metals, hormones, traces of drugs. Hair records stress, diet, even the places we've been. It's a biological record of our choices. It has no life of its own, yet it preserves the evidence of ours. And perhaps that's what fascinates us, that hair is at once trivial and deeply symbolic, dead yet profoundly expressive. We wear it as a keepsake from an era when every hair mattered. And though today we dye it, straighten it, cut and bleach it, within its structure still lingers the echo of the fur that once saved our species. Hair, though it seems unremarkable, is one of biology's most multifunctional inventions. Nature never creates anything by accident, and certainly doesn't keep something for millions of years unless it serves a purpose. So if we never shaved it off entirely, it must have meaning. And it does, though not always the kind we expect. First, protection. Hair is the skin's first line of defense, and the skin is our largest organ of contact with the world. On the head, it forms a natural sun helmet, scattering ultraviolet radiation and insulating against temperature. It shields the brain, the most delicate and energy-hungry organ in the body, from overheating. Eyebrows and lashes, in turn, are small, underrated umbrellas. They direct sweat and water to the sides before they reach the eyes, while the tiny hairs along the eyelids respond to air movement and touch, warning of anything approaching. The hairs in the nose and ears act as biological air filters, trapping dust, particles, and bacteria before they can reach the lungs. Next, thermoregulation. In most animals, hair and fur act as insulation, trapping a layer of air close to the skin to preserve warmth. Humans have only partly retained that mechanism. The hair on our arms and legs no longer warms us like fur once did, but it still serves as a sensor. It reacts when cold, fear, or emotion causes the tiny muscles at the follicles to tighten. That slight, almost invisible motion we call goosebumps is an echo of our furry ancestors. Back then, raised hair meant more air between the strands, better insulation, and also a defensive signal. You looked bigger, more threatening. Today, all that remains is the memory of that reflex, a souvenir of a mechanism that no longer works, yet never fully disappeared. There are also hairs that serve communication. In the animal kingdom, these are visual signals: the lion's mane, the peacock's feathers, the hedgehog's spines. In humans, the same pattern evolved into cultural language. Long, thick hair once meant health and youth, genetic quality. For men, facial hair became a sign of maturity and strength, a hormonal message saying, "I can protect." Hair took on social, erotic, and symbolic functions. The way we wear it is a message, whether we realize it or not. Long, short, curly, shaved. Every choice is a fragment of a language we've been speaking for thousands of years. Some hair serves an even subtler role. It's part of a chemical language. Hair under the arms and in intimate areas is no accident. These regions are centers of pheromone secretion, scent compounds that once played a crucial role in mate selection. Hair traps those molecules, allowing the scent to linger, to become part of the signal. Today, in the age of deodorants and showers, that function has faded. But for most of our species' history, it was one of the most important. Human beings are naked animals only in appearance. What we lost in quantity, we gained in precision. Wherever hair remains, it serves a purpose: protective, sensory, communicative. Hair is part of the body's perception system, a barrier against the world, and an archive of its influence. Each strand is a thin protein line connecting us to who we were before we learned to speak or build cities. Why did humans lose their fur? It seems a simple question until you try to answer it. Because losing hair is what separates us from nearly all other mammals. After all, hair is one of nature's most brilliant inventions. Cheap, light, self-renewing, a perfect natural armor. From an evolutionary standpoint, you don't abandon a system like that without reason. And yet humans are the only primates that chose a naked body. Why? The most classic explanation is the thermoregulatory hypothesis. Around 2 million years ago, Africa's climate began to change. Forests shrank, and our ancestors, the early members of the Homo genus, left the trees and began living on open savannas. In the heat and sunlight, thick fur stopped being a shield and became a trap. The human body started to sweat profusely. Our cooling system, far more efficient than that of other animals. But for sweat to work, it must evaporate. Fur, which traps moisture, prevents that. So the skin had to be exposed. Evolution, as always, had no plan. It simply favored individuals with sparser hair, who tolerated the heat better, could hunt longer, and survive without overheating. Over time, they passed on their genes. Step by step, the fur vanished, and sweat became our air conditioning. But that's not the whole story. Some biologists believe hair loss had another motive: a war against parasites. Hair provides an ideal home for fleas, lice, ticks, and other uninvited guests. For creatures living in close social groups, like humans, that's a serious problem. The fewer the hairs, the easier it is to spot and remove a parasite. This could have offered a health advantage, especially once we began living together and sharing space. Naked bodies were cleaner, healthier, more resistant to disease. Then there is the sexual hypothesis, proposed by, among others, Desmond Morris. According to it, hair loss was linked to mate selection. Smooth skin became a signal of youth and health, traits attractive to the opposite sex. Hair remained only where it still played an erotic or communicative role. On the head, where it could be seen from afar, and in the armpits and genital areas, where it helped retain pheromone scents. The body became not only practical, but aesthetic, a tool of attraction. Some scientists go further still. The aquatic ape hypothesis, controversial but intriguing, suggests that at some stage, humans led a semi-aquatic life. Losing fur would have made swimming easier, while a layer of subcutaneous fat, common in us but rare in other primates, acted as insulation in water. Though the evidence is limited, the theory offers fascinating explanations. Our affinity for water, our ease in diving, even our tears and sweat, both saline, both with aquatic origins. In truth, none of these theories exclude the others. Evolution is not a contest for a single explanation. It's a mosaic, a process where many factors overlap. Humans shed their fur because it was easier, cooler, healthier, and perhaps even more attractive. We lost the pelt but gained a new kind of skin, sensitive, communicative, capable of touch and of sweat. Skin that became the stage for everything human, from intimacy to shame. Hair, then, never disappeared entirely. It survived like a footnote in the margins of our evolutionary story. The traces of fur that once kept us warm now tell the tale of how we became what we are. The only species able to understand that nakedness itself can be an adaptation. Now imagine a human completely without hair, not only bald on the head but without eyebrows, eyelashes, or a single fine hair anywhere on the skin, smooth as glass without a trace of fuzz. At first glance it seems merely an aesthetic variation, but in truth such a being would be a different species altogether. Hair, though seemingly redundant, are the silent guardians of our physiology. If they vanished, we'd lose more than we think. The first blow would strike our ability to protect the skin. The hair on the head works as a natural sun filter, absorbing ultraviolet radiation and dispersing heat. Without it, the scalp would overheat quickly, and the brain, the most delicate organ, would be at risk. Without brows and lashes, sweat, rain, and dust would flow straight into our eyes. Without the hairs of the nose and ears, each breath would carry clouds of microscopic particles, dust, bacteria, allergens. Breathing would be less safe, forcing the immune system into constant battle. The second problem, thermoregulation. Paradoxically, although fur suggests warmth, its absence doesn't equal coolness. Hair helps maintain a thin layer of air close to the skin, a natural insulation that protects both from cold and from rapid evaporation of sweat. Without it, the skin would become too open. A hairless human would overheat faster in the sun, yet lose heat quickly in the cold. Our finely tuned thermal system, the one that allowed us to survive from the Sahara to Siberia, would be thrown out of balance. The third aspect is sensation. Every follicle is a tiny sensor, a nerve ending responding to the slightest movement of air, touch, or change in temperature. Thanks to them, the skin knows something approaches before we consciously feel it. Hair extends the sense of touch, forming part of an early warning system. Without it, we would be less sensitive, literally and metaphorically. The world would feel duller, less nuanced, and finally, communication. Hair is a language we use before we utter a single word. The way it looks, how we arrange it, how it changes with age, all send signals our ancestors once read instinctively. Without hair, we would lose an instrument of expression. A face without eyebrows is harder to read. Emotion fades, the gaze loses depth. A head without hair would make everyone look alike. Individuality would blur. Hair is part of who we are, both biologically and culturally. One could say that a completely hairless human would be like a device stripped of its sensors, filters, and communicators. Technically, such a person could survive. Of course, if they dressed, sought shelter, invented sunscreen and air conditioning. But biologically, they would be less efficient. Evolution stripped us of fur, but left what was essential, hair, in strategic places. It was a compromise between protection and cooling, between nature and culture. If we truly became completely smooth, nature would have had to invent something to replace it. Perhaps thicker skin with variable pigmentation, reacting to sunlight like photochromic glass. Perhaps a network of nerve receptors compensating for the lost sense of touch. Or perhaps, if history had unfolded differently, we would never have learned to feel shame about nakedness, because nakedness would have been the norm. Our culture, fashion, rituals, even our religions would look entirely different, because hair is not only biology. It is symbolic, one of those small physical details that gave meaning to all of human civilization. A human without hair would not only look different, they would be different in nature. Hair is as thin as thread, Yet it is what ties us to the past, to nature, and to one another. If it were gone, we might not even realize that something was missing. For sometimes, the most important things are the ones we cannot see. Hair can live a life of its own. A sudden chill, a burst of fear, a piece of music that stirs something deeper than words. And the skin begins to ripple with tiny bumps. We say that our hair stands on end, or that we get goosebumps. It feels poetic, but it is pure physiology, and like so many reflexes, a remnant of our ancient past. Each hair follicle has at its base a tiny muscle, the erector pili. It's a microscopic structure, invisible but unmistakable in its effect. When the body receives a signal, cold, fear, surprise, intense emotion, the nervous system sends an impulse to this muscle. It contracts, pulls the follicle, raises the hair, and tightens the skin around it, forming minuscule hills. Those bumps are what we call goosebumps. In animals, it's a very useful mechanism. When a cat is frightened or feels threatened, its fur instantly bristles. It looks larger, more imposing. It's a defensive reaction, a signal. Stay away. At the same time, the air layer between hairs increases, helping conserve warmth. In humans, the mechanism survived as a relic. It no longer warms us or scares off enemies, but it remains intertwined with emotion. When we hear music that moves us, watch a scene that grips our throat, the body reacts with the same ancient reflex. The hair rises, as if reminding us that emotion is as real as cold. But hair responds to more than just emotion. It is a remarkably active tissue. Though the hairs themselves are dead, their follicles are alive, innervated, and hormonally sensitive. That is why they react to stress, diet, sleep, and especially hormones. It's why hair falls out when we go through difficult periods and grows back when the body returns to balance. For scientists, hair is more than ornament. It is a biomarker, a chemical archive of the body. In its structure, one can find traces of stress hormones, toxins, drugs, medications, even nutritional history. Each centimeter of hair is several weeks of recorded life. The properties of hair are equally fascinating. A single human hair can support a weight of about 100 grams, and a full head of hair, several kilograms. Hair is resistant to stretching, doesn't dissolve in water, and decays slowly. That's why archaeologists often find it in graves long after everything else has turned to dust. Hair is also a fine record of human evolution. Differences in thickness, curl, and color are written maps of geographical adaptation. Thick, straight hair in East Asians protects better against cold, while tightly curled hair in Africans improves cooling. It has greater evaporative surface. Hair color reflects the balance between sun protection and vitamin D synthesis. The less sunlight, the lighter the hair, allowing rays to penetrate more effectively. Hair is also a miniature laboratory of physics. A strand is made of keratin, the same substance found in nails and animal horns, but its spiral structure acts like a spring. That's what gives hair its elasticity. It can stretch up to 30% of its length and return to its original shape. Curly hair owes its form to asymmetrical follicles. The curl itself isn't programmed. It's simply a matter of the angle at which the hair emerges from the scalp. And perhaps the strangest thing is that hair responds to the world even though it is dead. When you're frightened, moved, or cold, when you simply feel something intensely, your hair moves with you, as if the body, despite millions of years of evolution, still wants to speak in its own animal language. Hair stands on end because, in that instant, your biology reminds you that you are still part of nature, and that sometimes no words are needed to feel it, only the rising of hair on your skin. Hair is not just biology. It is one of those rare things that link the body with culture. It grows from our skin, but also from our myths, religions, and rituals. For thousands of years, people have attributed to it a power that extends far beyond physiology. Because hair, though dead, symbolizes what is most alive: strength, freedom, identity, time. In ancient cultures, hair was a sign of status and belonging. In Egypt, a smoothly shaved head meant purity and control. Priests and priestesses removed every hair from their bodies, believing that by doing so they approached the divine ideal. In India, the opposite was true. Long hair symbolized spiritual power. Yogis and sadhus grew it for years, letting it twist into dreadlocks as a visible sign of renouncing the material world. In the Bible, Samson lost his strength only when his hair was cut, as though his power was encoded in keratin strands. In Greek mythology, hair represented fate and life itself. The Moirai, goddesses of destiny, spun the thread of existence and eventually cut it, like a hair. In the Middle Ages, hair became a battlefield between body and soul. For the church, a woman's long hair could signify temptation, so nuns cut it off as a gesture of renunciation. In many cultures, cutting one's hair marked transformation, a new stage of life, mourning, punishment, or purification. When women in the 20th century began wearing short hair, it wasn't merely practical, it was symbolic, an act of liberation from old roles. And when young people in the 1960s let their hair grow long, it wasn't just fashion, it was a declaration. We are not like you. Hair is a language. Through it we express identity, belonging, rebellion, emotion. It can define religion. The side curls of Orthodox Jews, the turbans of Sikhs, the covered hair of Muslim women. It can speak of gender, or blur it intentionally. It can signal tribal, subcultural, or artistic identity. We can braid it into tradition, dye it into protest, or shave it in defiance. Hair is the most personal part of the body we can freely change, and precisely because of that, it became one of humanity's most powerful symbols. Hair, even in art, has always been more than mere decoration. For the pre-Raphaelites, it was a metaphor for the female soul, fluid, luminous, untamed. For 20th century artists like Marina Abramović, it became a tool of expression, a physical boundary between the self and the world. For prisoners in concentration camps, the shaving of the head was a form of dehumanization, an erasure of identity. Hair grows slowly, so losing it hurts symbolically, like losing time itself. Baldness may seem like a purely aesthetic problem, but in truth, it is a deeply biological drama. Hair doesn't just fall out for no reason. Each strand lives by a rhythm set by the body, a kind of clock. It grows, rests, dies, and is reborn. But when that rhythm falters, when the body falls into stress, hair begins to vanish like leaves from a tree startled by an early frost. Every hair follows its own life cycle. The growth phase, anagen, lasts from 2 to 6 years. During this time, the follicle works at full speed, feeding the hair with blood, oxygen, and hormones. Then comes a brief catagen phase, a transition where the follicle shrinks, followed by telogen, a period of rest after which the hair simply falls out. It's perfectly normal. We lose between 50 and 100 hairs every day. But when something in this cycle breaks down, hair starts falling out by the thousands. The most common culprit is stress. Under intense psychological pressure, the body activates survival mode. A rush of cortisol, adrenaline, energy mobilization. The problem is, in that state, the body stops investing in non-essential functions. Hair, biologically speaking, is a luxury. The nervous system sends a message to the follicles: halt production. Follicles shrink, some hairs enter their resting phase too early, and a few weeks later, they start to fall. That's why people often notice hair loss months after a stressful event. It's the echo of an old fear, finally reaching the scalp. But it isn't just stress. More and more people are losing their hair because our lifestyles are chronically stressful. Not from one dramatic event, but from the constant hum of tension, sleeplessness, poor nutrition, and the steady bombardment of stress hormones. Hair follicles are extremely sensitive. They act like biological barometers, the first to signal when something in the system goes wrong. There are other causes too. The most common is androgenetic alopecia, a genetic reaction of follicles to the hormone DHT, a byproduct of testosterone that shortens the hair's life cycle, making each new hair thinner until growth stops altogether. Long ago, this mechanism may have had an evolutionary purpose. Less hair could have helped mature, active men stay cool. Today, when we no longer need that evolutionary air conditioning, it lingers as an unwanted relic of the past. For women, hair loss is more complex. It can stem from hormonal imbalances after pregnancy, during menopause, with polycystic ovary syndrome, or from deficiencies, iron, zinc, protein. Hair is highly metabolic. It's the first to react to processed food, alcohol, dehydration, or lack of sleep. That's why doctors often say hair isn't an ornament, it's a health indicator. Here's a fascinating fact. Every hair follicle is a microorgan with its own nervous and immune system. It has immune cells, hormone receptors, even a miniature circadian rhythm. When the immune system starts attacking these follicles, as in alopecia areata, hair falls out in patches, as if the body were erasing parts of its own map. This isn't about hormones anymore, but autoimmunity, the body turning its defenses against itself. One of the strangest forms of hair loss is psychological, trichotillomania, the compulsion to pull out one's own hair. It's not just an act, it's a mechanism of relief. The tense brain seeks release and finds it in that gesture. From a neurobiological point of view, it's proof that hair is deeply intertwined with emotion. Its touch, tension, even its removal activate the same circuits of control and relief. Modern humans go bald more often than their ancestors because we live in a permanent fight or flight mode, and our bodies never get the signal that it's safe again. In the past, stress was short-lived, a chase, a battle, hunger. Today it lasts for years. Cortisol, once our savior, quietly weakens us, and one of the first places this shows is the scalp. And yet, hair has a remarkable capacity for regeneration. As long as the follicle isn't permanently destroyed, it can wake up, even after many months. That's why people who lose their hair after illness or trauma often experience something profoundly moving: the return of soft, downy regrowth, as if the body were whispering, "We can grow again." Hair grows with extraordinary determination. Each follicle is a tiny factory that never truly stops. Its cells divide faster than in nearly any other part of the body. That same intensity, that unstoppable vitality that makes hair lush and alive, becomes its curse when chemotherapy begins. Cancer drugs have one primary goal: to stop the division of cancer cells. Cancer is a disease of uncontrolled growth. Cells multiply, ignoring every signal to stop. Chemotherapy acts like a weapon of mass destruction against anything that divides quickly. The problem is that cancer cells aren't the only ones that do. Bone marrow, the lining of the gut, and, crucially, hair follicles also divide rapidly. When the drug reaches them through the bloodstream, it halts the division of stem cells inside the follicle's bulb. Follicles that usually hum like microscopic engines suddenly stall. Hairs that were in their growth phase abruptly shift to rest, and within days or weeks they begin to fall. Not because they die, but because their factories are gone. This process is known as anagen effluvium, a dramatic sudden loss that often affects the entire scalp and body. Hair can fall out in handfuls, sometimes overnight. For many patients, it's the moment when illness becomes visible, when the body begins to speak its struggle. That's why hair loss after chemotherapy carries such powerful symbolism. It's not just a side effect of treatment, but the moment when the invisible enemy becomes seen. Interestingly, not all drugs cause it, and the severity depends on the type of therapy. Certain cytostatics, like doxorubicin, cyclophosphamide, or taxanes, are particularly harsh on dividing cells, while newer, more targeted treatments often spare the hair. Even more curious, not all hair reacts the same way. The fastest growing hairs, on the scalp, eyebrows, lashes, are the first to go. Body hair often lingers longer, it cycles slower, and while it may seem like every strand is gone, many follicles simply enter a state of hibernation. When treatment ends, they begin to awaken. That hair grows back is one of the most extraordinary proofs of the human body's capacity for self-renewal. It often returns changed, thinner, thicker, curlier, lighter, as if after the battle it needs a new beginning, a new form. Doctors even have a name for it: the chemo curl. Post-therapy waves that appear even in hair that was once straight. Modern medicine can now help protect hair during treatment using scalp cooling, which constricts blood vessels so less of the drug reaches the follicles. It doesn't work for everyone, but for some, it saves part of their hair. And even where the hair is lost, its meaning remains profoundly human. In many oncology centers, the moment of shaving the head becomes a ritual, an act of reclaiming control. Patients don't wait for the hair to fall. They take matters into their own hands. In that gesture lies power. I decide what I lose and what I keep. Paradoxically, it's often through the loss of hair that a new kind of beauty emerges. The beauty of resilience, of courage, of life that persists. Because even though hair can grow back, the experience that leaves its mark on skin and memory changes a person more deeply than almost anything else. Hair doesn't listen to cosmetics. It listens to the body. You can coat it in oils, serums, and dyes. But if your body is tired, sleep-deprived, and stressed, no conditioner will save it. Because hair doesn't grow on your head. It grows from within. It's a reflection of what's happening inside. The most important, yet most often ignored, factor is sleep. During sleep, the body regenerates, and hair follicles, like all tissues, depend on that rhythm. Nighttime is when most of the body's repair work happens. Growth hormone production, cell renewal, cortisol regulation. Chronic lack of sleep is a silent thief of hair density. Just a few weeks of shortened nights are enough for hair to grow weaker, more brittle. Sleep is the cheapest conditioner in the world, though you can't buy it in a bottle. The second pillar is nutrition. Hair is made of protein, a keratin, so it needs amino acids, B vitamins, especially biotin, zinc, iron, and omega-3 fatty acids. It's no coincidence that people on restrictive diets often complain about hair loss. The body, deprived of resources, saves energy where it can. From a biological point of view, hair isn't a priority. When energy is scarce, the body directs it to the heart, brain, and liver. Hair gets the leftovers. That's why healthy hair starts on the plate. Eggs, fish, nuts, leafy greens, legumes. That's the real hair care. The third factor is stress, or rather its absence. Modern research shows that chronic tension literally reduces blood flow to the hair follicles. Stress constricts the blood vessels in the scalp, meaning less oxygen and fewer nutrients reach the roots. It's like cutting off their power supply. That's why meditation, walking, deep breathing, laughter, anything that lowers cortisol, truly helps hair grow. Sometimes the best anti-hair loss shampoo is simply an hour of peace each day. The next pillar is movement. Physical activity boosts circulation and oxygenation throughout the body, including the scalp. Even 15 minutes a day can stimulate microcirculation and wake up the follicles. That's why people with active lifestyles often have healthier hair. Not because they work out, but because their bodies regularly remember that they're alive. And finally, there's daily care, the part we see in the mirror. Contrary to popular belief, hair doesn't like overprotectiveness. Too much washing, hot water, straighteners, blow dryers, all of these damage its structure. A hair strand is like a fine rope. Pull and heat it enough and it starts to fray. What it really needs is warm, not hot, water, a gentle scalp massage, a natural shampoo without harsh detergents, and careful detangling. And sometimes it needs to rest, to go unwashed for a day, letting sebum, the natural oil the scalp produces, nourish it from the roots. It's the hair's own conditioner, designed by nature itself. Hair also loves rituals, not sudden changes. Abrupt bleaching, dyeing, straightening, or sun exposure, all are like thermal shock to it. Better to do less, but regularly. An oil treatment here and there, a protein mask now and then. And sometimes, simply peace. Hair grows best when we forget about it. One more timeless secret: scalp massage. An old but brilliant habit. Gentle circular movements boost circulation and loosen the scalp muscles, which surprisingly can tense up under stress too. Massage isn't just a pleasure, it's biology. More blood, more oxygen, more growth. And perhaps the most fascinating thing, our hair has its own circadian rhythm. It grows faster during the day, slower at night. It slows down in winter, speeds up in summer. Hormones, light, and temperature all influence it. That's why caring for hair isn't a beauty ritual, but a way of living in sync with the rhythms of the body and nature. Hair is like a plant. It needs light, water, calm, and time. It doesn't like haste or pretense, and it looks its best when it's simply the result of a good life, not just for the hair, but for the whole body. The world of hair is full of legends, passed from mother to daughter, from hairdresser to client, from internet to internet. Some of them hold a grain of truth. Others survive only because they sound logical. Hair is an emotional subject, and emotions love myths. Myth number 1. Frequent trimming makes hair grow faster. No, it doesn't. Trimming affects only the length of what already exists, not the speed at which new hair grows. Growth rate depends on genes, hormones, and health, not scissors. What trimming really changes is appearance. Hair looks healthier, the ends are even, not split, so the whole mane seems thicker and stronger. It's like with a lawn. Cutting it doesn't make it grow faster, but it sure looks like it does. Myth number 2. Brushing your hair 100 times a day makes it stronger. People once repeated this like prayer, but no one ever asked why 100. The truth is, excessive brushing can do more harm than good. The mechanical friction damages the hair's cuticle, making it dull, brittle, and frizzy. Brushing does have a purpose. It distributes sebum and stimulates circulation, but a few strokes a day are enough. Hair doesn't like violence, even in the name of tradition. Myth number 3. Stress causes gray hair. Now this one gets interesting. For years, science dismissed it, until 2020 when Harvard researchers found that it's not entirely a myth. Stress can accelerate graying. Here's how. Intense stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, which releases adrenaline. That surge affects stem cells in the hair follicle responsible for pigment, called melanin. Under stress, those cells get damaged or burned out, and new hairs grow in without color. So no, you won't go gray overnight. But if life puts you through an emotional marathon, your hair might remember it. Myth number 4. Gray hair has no color. False. Gray hair does have color, not from pigment but from air. When melanin stops depositing, microscopic air bubbles form inside the hair shaft, scattering light and giving that silvery white effect. Grayness, then, isn't an absence of color. It's an optical illusion. Myth number 5. If you pluck one gray hair, 3 will grow in its place. A beautiful, moralizing myth. One that was probably meant to stop us from tugging at our heads. In reality, a single follicle can grow only one hair. But there's a hint of truth. Pulling out a gray hair doesn't reverse the process. Pigment won't return. In its place, another gray hair will grow. And if you damage the follicle, it might die altogether, and nothing will grow. So if there's something worth pulling, it's probably just a bad habit. Myth number 6. Hair grows after death. A classic tale from horror stories and old graveyard legends. The truth is far less dramatic. After death, the skin dehydrates and shrinks, making hair and nails appear longer, but nothing actually grows. The body is no longer alive. Cells have stopped dividing. It's just an illusion that once spooked gravediggers. Myth number 7. Hair dye permanently ruins your hair. Not quite. Dyeing, especially bleaching, does open the hair's cuticle and alter its structure, but it's not always a catastrophe. Modern cosmetic chemistry can now rebuild keratin bonds and partially repair damage. The key is how often you do it, and with what. The dye itself isn't the enemy, as long as it doesn't replace sleep. Myth number 8. Hair is dead tissue. Half true. The hair we see is indeed dead, but its root, hidden beneath the skin, is very much alive. An active biological machine. That's where everything happens. Cell division, pigmentation, hormonal response. That's why products applied only to the visible hair work on the surface. They can protect and smooth, but not nourish it in a biological sense. The real life of the hair happens where it's invisible. Myth number 9. Wearing hats causes baldness. No, though it's a myth that survived generations. Hair doesn't need to breathe. It has no lungs. Hats, helmets, turbans, none of these cause baldness unless there's physical friction or irritation. What really harms hair is stress, hormones, diet, and genetics, not wardrobe choices. Myth number 10. Natural always means good. It sounds lovely, but biology doesn't work that way. Onion, garlic, or baking soda, all common in homemade masks, can do more harm than good. Natural doesn't always mean safe, and chemistry is really just precise biology. The best care for your hair is balance, a bit of nature, a bit of science, and a lot of common sense. Never before in human history have we devoted so much effort, money, and science to reclaim something as seemingly trivial as hair. It's a paradox. In an age when we can edit genes, print organs, and build artificial hearts, we still can't fully restore hair once it's gone, but that boundary is finally starting to crack. In laboratories across the world, scientists are now growing hair follicles, real biological structures created from skin cells and stem cells. A decade ago, this idea belonged to the realm of science fiction. Today, the first human trials are already underway. In 2023, a team of Japanese researchers announced that they had successfully grown fully functional hair follicles from induced pluripotent stem cells, cells capable of transforming into any type of tissue. In practical terms, this means one thing. A person with baldness might one day print their own hair. But that's not all. Biotech companies in the United States and South Korea are developing methods to reprogram hair follicles that have stopped working. It turns out that even a bald scalp still contains dormant follicle cells. They're just shut down by hormones, mainly DHT, a derivative of testosterone. Scientists are now trying to wake these cells using molecular signals, special proteins, enzyme inhibitors, and microRNAs that restore their ability to grow. It's like turning the lights back on in a room that seemed long abandoned. At the same time, research into gene therapy is advancing rapidly. Scientists at Yale University have discovered that a signaling pathway called WNT plays a key role in hair regeneration. When properly activated, it can trigger hair growth even in areas that have been bald for years. But gene manipulation is delicate work. That same pathway is also involved in cancer cell division. Researchers must therefore walk a fine line between regeneration and risk. Hair has also become a target for tissue engineering and 3D printing. Yes, you read that right. Printed hair. Not synthetic strands, but biological ones that can be transplanted like seedlings. One Boston-based company is experimenting with a bio-ink containing follicle and skin cells that can integrate with the human body after printing. This isn't cosmetology anymore. It's synthetic biology in action. And while it might sound like a vanity project, it's really much deeper than that. Hair is protective, sensory, and emotional tissue. Losing it, especially due to conditions like alopecia areata or chemotherapy, often wounds the psyche more than the body. That's why scientists aren't just fighting for aesthetics, but for identity, for the feeling of being oneself again. There are also more surprising directions. One emerging concept uses artificial intelligence to analyze a person's genetic profile and scalp microbiome. AI could help create personalized therapies, tailoring nutrients, hormones, and growth factors to each individual. Not one shampoo for everyone, but a biological program that understands how your hair works. Another frontier is what some call biohacking the scalp, using microstimulation, electromagnetic fields, and low-level laser light pulses. It's not magic, but pure physiology. These signals boost circulation and activate the mitochondria in follicle cells. The effect? Hair that stops shutting down and starts remembering it's alive. What comes next? Perhaps within 2 or 3 decades, baldness will be seen not as permanent, but as temporary. A phase, not a fate. Just as today we can erase scars with lasers, in 20 years we might regenerate follicles as easily as fingernails. It's fascinating that something as fragile as a strand of hair can lead us to the deepest questions in biology about regeneration, aging, cellular memory, and how long we can outsmart time. Because hair is one of the first places where time becomes visible. So maybe the future of hair isn't just about beauty. Maybe it's about understanding the very process of human aging. And perhaps, who knows, the first breakthrough in renewing the whole body will start with a single hair